So with the position that the Blackhawks are in, let's say they are drafting first overall this year. You, as Kyle Davidson, went with Artem Levshinov at number 2 last year, and instead of what I think a lot of people thought was going to be Ivan Demidov as a guy that could play with Connor Bedard. If you're sitting there at number 1 and you have the top prospect being Matthew Schaefer, who, as you're saying here, kind of is similar or in the same, cut of the same cloth of Quinn Hughes and Cale Makar, do you abandon the best player available mentality and go more with addressing Bedard? Or, how do you justify going, well, we went Levshinov number 2 last year, we're drafting another defenseman with this pick?
See, it's always difficult when you have all these defensemen you're drafting early, and you look at the Montreal Canadiens where they had a situation, they have too many young defensemen, they've had to ship a few out. It's hard to pass on Matthew Schaefer. It definitely is. But it's almost like if it was out of their hands and they didn't have to take Schaefer, it'd be like, okay, then a guy like Martone opens up, and that seems like a perfect fit. Or you go out there and pick James Higgins, and you take a lot of the responsibilities off of Bedard and just say, go out there and score a lot of goals and do what he's best. I know there's also the option of Michael Misa. I think a lot of scouts are concerned about his overall game, and I know Hockey Canada definitely was. He scores a lot, but could be at some points a little bit invisible out there and not affecting the play as much. The smart set choice says go out there and pick Matthew Schaefer, because this is a guy that just no one's able to compete against defensively. He's that much better. But at the same time, I like what Porter Martone and Connor Bedard would do. So for me, it's a toss-up, but smart play says Schaefer. My heart says Porter Martone.
The Blackhawks have won 2 out of their last 3 games. Maybe they'll get hot and they'll get out of that top spot and have the decision made for them.
I've been thinking about this
because you can't go wrong with any of those picks. That's the thing about this year's draft. It's not deep, but the top 4 look really solid.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot over the last handful of days as we have been prepping for this interview, Steven, and thinking about the draft now. And the more I read about Schaefer, and I know the Hawks are full of defensive talent, they are not full of Matthew Schaefers. And if you draft that guy, then you can use Kevin Korchinski or Artem Levshinov or whoever name defensive prospect X you want to name as a very valuable trade chip to go get what you need for Connor Bedard too. So I know they're loaded with defensemen. I know that. But if you're seriously putting Schaefer in the conversation with Cale Makar and Quinn Hughes, that's really hard to pass up. And yeah, you want guys that can score. They can score. Cale Makar is basically a defensive forward. We watched him last night. He's everywhere all the time. Yeah. He's an unstoppable force. Quinn Hughes, maybe a slight notch below. I know Hawks fans are looking at forwards and defense, and this defense bucket is very, very full, but there's no one of that level, the level of Schaefer in that bucket. So if I'm Kyle Davidson, I'm kind of hoping to not get the number 1 pick so I don't have to worry about that decision. But if they were to do that, I would not hate it. I would not, because specifically Schaefer.
Yeah.
We're talking any other defenseman, hell no. But if you have the ability to get a guy of that ilk, Hughes, Makar, that's really hard to pass up, especially looking at the way, hasn't been that long, folks, that Duncan Keith and Brent Seabrook and Nicholas Hjalmarsson were your 1, 2, 3 for 3 Stanley Cups.
Yeah.
It's an embarrassment of riches, and that's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
I know that wasn't a question. That was more of a statement. But Steven, do you agree? Question mark.
For me, I want the chaos of Bedard passing to Martone. But yeah, you don't really pass off. If Schaefer's there, you're taking Schaefer. Talking to scouts, I've asked about 20 scouts over the last 2 months. Who would you pick? Would you take Martone? Would you take Schaefer? Would you take Misa? Would you take Higgins? And Schaefer's name, number 1, almost not every time, but a good majority. The big argument against James Higgins, for as smart as he is, he's not physically strong. And we saw that against guys who were barely bigger than him, pushing him around at the U18 or the World Juniors and the U18s, actually. And that's not a good sign. So the physicality sign is not great there. You look at Misa, again, not an all-around player, definitely less of an all-around player than the other guys, but scores a lot of goals. Like, that's what you could do. You could play center, you could play wing. I think if you want to maximize his value, you want him playing on the wing with Connor Bedard, but in the end, it still feels like it's a two-horse race, but based off of most scouts I talked to, and it is either Hagens or Schaefer, and Schaefer's the one that's like, you don't want to give up on that. There isn't a Schaefer next year. There isn't a guy close to Schaefer this year. There is a guy close to Schaefer in 2027, and that is Landon Dupont. But you don't want to be bad in 2027 at that point, given the Blackhawks have been in the rebuild for a few years already.
We all silly like the mayor.